Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reiki Crossroads and Connections, where we're exploring pathways and practices that help you to live a life that is grounded, that is spacious, connected, and that helps us all to remember ourselves. And we're doing that through conversations between a Reiki teacher and practitioners in realms of healing, psychology, of art, of science, spirituality, and magic, exploring the connections between these diverse practices to illuminate the healing patterns that humans have created for ourselves since our beginning. Thank you so much for joining us for the next few steps in this conversation. My name is Michaela. I'm really glad to have you along. And today we get to dive into a topic that feels so juicy and magical and mysterious, and yet also somehow incredibly practical and applicable in our daily life, which is my very favorite kind of practice, bringing those things together. And we get to talk with Sabrina Marie Chase about her in-depth tarot practice, specifically doing deep dives into a person's life using round tarot cards. I really look forward to learning more about this strategy because round cards offer a tremendous opportunity for data collection and allow Sabrina to explore the beliefs, habits, and patterns of the people who come to her. And so I am so excited to get this conversation going and welcome you in, Sabrina.
I'm delighted to be here.
So as we circle in a bit together, I'd love to just share what I know about you already. So Sabrina and I have already had a couple of conversations in the past. I was able to guest on her podcast, Grounded Magic, which is an absolute delight. I will put that link down below. And so this is kind of a continuation, but also focusing in on this incredible work that you do. So to help ground this conversation and build a foundation on which we can build it, I just want to share that you, Sabrina, you're a teacher, you're a tarot diviner and a writer. You are an elder in the Blue Star tradition of Wicca, and you also practice Buddhism, are a graduate of the Griffin's Grove School of Shamanism. You love your last career as a medical anthropologist. We got to talk a little bit about that before, so interesting. And you still teach in short snippets on YouTube, on Instagram. I love that we have these pathways for teaching that are non-traditional. But these days you focus on tarot. You focus on this mystical practice. And you, dear watcher, can check out her website, sabrinamariechase.com. Of course, that will be down below, or find her on Facebook, and those links will all be down below. Sabrina, you also, as I already said, host a podcast called Grounded Magic with your amazing co-host, April Tarot, who founded the Sacred Sisterhood of Sexuality. I really hope to get her on and have a conversation about that here. And together, the two of you interview guests across spiritual and magical spectrums and explore new ways of blending magic and science in pursuit of better ways to align with spirit. And that was one of my very favorite podcast conversations I got to have. And so I'm super excited to flip that script and bring you in here today to talk about your tarot practice.
Thank you so much. Usually it's hard to get me to shut up about my tarot practice, and now I have free reign, so I'm delighted.
I love it. Yeah, so I'd love to just start by just inviting you to share how you're doing today. Just kind of set the temperature in the room. What's in the cauldron for you today? How are you?
So I've been preparing for this all day, which has caused me to really think about my life. Why am I here on this earth? What am I here to do? How is that path unfolding for me? So preparing for this moment with you has caused me to be really curious and very reflective. So I guess if I had to choose a word, it would be curious. I'm really curious about how all this is unfolding and how it's going to unfold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel all of that too. I think that that place of curious reflection, self-reflection, reflection on this moment in time, our place in it, what we are, how we're feeling called to respond has been really up for me as well. I've shared in a number of videos recently, just in a period of really intense concentration of noticing and awareness how I'm feeling and how I'm wanting to respond to the world. Some of that being through very personal experiences, and then also, of course, in reflection too. Just some of the things that are up in our shared space and our shared consciousness. And I think it's really, it's a moment. I mean, one could say that any moment of life could be this moment, but it certainly feels poignant in this time to really be in that question of how am I meant to contribute? What is really the way in which my gifts and my passions and my needs meet the world's needs, and how can I be active inside of that, and how can I be sustained inside of that? And so all of those questions are up. And so, yeah, space of curious reflection is absolutely part of how I'm feeling today as well. So I love that we are in that same space together.
I'm not surprised. We seem to echo each other in really interesting ways. So, right there with you. Why am I here in this moment? What is my job? How can I make this better? I find that it is often easy. I find that in general, unless you're very reflective and thoughtful, it's not always easy to make things better, but it is usually very possible to make them worse. So, as I move into a situation, I want to think about it. And having that medical anthropology training, which is not clinical, but is very influenced by clinicians, I'm always asking myself, so how can I do no harm? How can I help? How can I not make this worse? So I think many of us in the spirituality and healing realms and the teaching realms are grappling with this right now. It's a good moment for that kind of reflection.
It is, and it's the right kind of questions for the moment. And I think that you bring up such an important point because I think we generally tend to think of ourselves fairly neutrally. And so, when we think about our influence, often it's easy to jump to what's my positive influence and how can I, positively influence whatever, the situation is. But remembering that our influence can have impacts that are wide ranging. And we're not neutral, right? Because we're in relationship to everything that is around us. And we're, complex, vulnerable beings in a dangerous world. And that can cause harm in ways that we don't even know. And so not to make that wrong or to shame ourselves, but to hold that in great compassion and to really hold that in, in the empowered sense that we change every room that we walk into, right? Every
Absolutely.
time we walk into a room, we change it, and we can be. It doesn't take a lot of awareness, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to shift how we influence that room.
Mhm.
So, and there are certainly people who are intentionally influencing spaces in ways that are harmful. So we can, at the very least, be intentional about influencing spaces in ways that are life-giving and that are healing, or at the very least, neutral.
Agreed. Agreed.
So with that, there's already such juiciness here, such potential for amazing conversation. And where I really love to ground these conversations is in kind of bringing us into this moment through the pathways of the threads of your life. You
Mhm.
do this incredible work with Tarot that we're going to get to learn more about the particular specialization that you have. And then you have this fascinating history with medical anthropology and the weaving together of those things and countless other aspects of your life that make the tapestry that is you. And in any given moment, one or more of those threads that make up that tapestry might have the most meaning and have, feel the most valuable to share. And so I'd just love to invite you to reflect on what some of those threads are in your life that have brought you to this moment before we dive into what this work looks like for you now.
So I really believe that there are few accidents in our lives. And I have always felt that I chose to be born at this time and that I had a job to do. And I think that the experiences I've had have been critical, crucial, and necessary to create what I'm here to do. And I really think, really, there are three things. I've been thinking about it all day, getting ready to talk to you. And I think there are three things that are important threads. And the first one was I grew up in a biracial, bicultural household. My mother is from San Jose, Costa Rica, and she grew up in a household of educators. Her mother and father were both educators, and they were both very spiritual. My mother ended up being both very Catholic and also pretty witchy.
It's a good
My
combination.
It is interesting. I think she wouldn't describe herself that way, but that's how what I got. And my father was born in Dodge City, Kansas. He is as white as can be and strong and pragmatic and rural, really rural, grounded in the earth and in farming. But also, he became an educator, right? So, from my parents, growing up in this bicultural household from my mother, if you know anything about Latin culture, magical realism is not just a genre of literature, it's a way of life in Latin America. A sense that spirits are part of your life, that profound mystical things can insert themselves in the most seemingly random moments, and I grew up with that from her. She brought that to me. So I always had this sense that spirit was right there and intuition was real and we could touch and we could, as humans, be those things. But she was also an educator. And my father's an educator. So this was a household where social science and science were embraced and accepted. I never had to choose.
Yeah.
I never had to choose. I got to be both my whole life. And that's been profound in the way it set my life. And I mentioned that both of my parents were teachers, and even my mother's mother and father were teacher. My mother had five living sisters, and her parents decided that every one of those girls would be highly educated and would never be dependent on a man for their living. And before they married, they would be able to do work. And they succeeded. So I became a teacher. My dad's a teacher. He taught junior high school and high school. My mother taught at the university level for decades. I became a scholar. My brother became a scholar. When we're walking around together and somebody says, "Hey, Dr. Chase, three heads swivel," right? Like, who are you talking to? So that was really important. And I became first an archaeologist and then later a medical anthropologist. And that informed everything about how I think. I'm a scholar, I'm a thinker, I'm an analyzer. I love patterns, I love data. I'm yay science, yay social science. And then the last thing is tarot. I saw my first tarot reading when I was maybe 5 or 6. My mother was in graduate school, and one of her colleagues in her program was named Victor, and he was from Mexico. And he came and he brought his cards and he did a reading for my mom. And remember being totally fascinated. What was it happening? What was going on? And then years later, when I was a sophomore in high school, in a university bookstore in Stillwater, Oklahoma, I found my first tarot deck. And it was the French woodcuts, the Marseille deck. Oh, so ugly. I do not resonate with that deck. Many people do. It is fantastic, but I had to buy it. I was compelled. I had to buy it. And I began reading compulsively with it. I had the little booklet. Later, I checked out one book from the university library, The Holy Book of Women's Mysteries, Part 2. Why the Stillwater Library had that book by Z. Budapest, I do not know.
Part two,
It was
not part one.
not part 1, only part 2. But it had a thin little chapter on tarot, and that's what got me started. And tarot became like another sense because I've been doing it all my life, like since I'm a sophomore and I'm now 60. So this is a practice I have been doing for decades. And I think of it as another sense. Like I have my sight, my hearing, my touch, my smell, all of these things. And I have tarot, which is like another sense. And then in about 1985, roughly, I moved to the big city. And when you're in Stillwater, the big city is Dallas, Texas. And I started working at Whole Foods when it was really young, when it was still, owned by the people who worked there. And I found my first round deck, and that changed my life.
Mm.
The Mother Peace Tarot by Karen Vogel and Vicki Noble. And I learned about yin and yang tilts. And for the next almost 40 years, I built my own proprietary method on top of theirs, and it changed my life.
Mm. Mm.
So,
Mm.
yeah.
That is so good. I'm so tickled by the way that you describe this seamless blend of science and magic. That those for you it did not have to be discrete. They didn't have to be separate. They didn't have to be incompatible with each other, which is so often what we receive is that message that these are incompatible systems of inquiry into the world when it's always seemed to me that they're utterly compatible. that they're answering the same questions and they're getting there through different pathways, but they're getting through pathways that the other one might not be able to fill in, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes they disagree with each other, but isn't that true in any human endeavor, right? Anytime we try to answer questions and it's answered by multiple people, there's going to be disagreement. And so this notion that scientific inquiry and process and magical engagement with the unseen and, viewing, as you said, the intuition as real and the unseen as real, that those have to be distinguished from each other, that the two can't coexist is it's never made a lot of sense to me. Um, and so hearing this story of being able to hold those two in the same household and in the same, childhood experience, it just makes me feel so happy. Thank you.
It's wonderful. And two more things I want to say. So, my dad, for most of his life, he was raised like a Methodist and a Protestant. And he was a little bit suspicious of all this stuff, but he loved my mom. And he would say things like, Sita, it's not the dead ones you need to worry about, it's the live ones that cause all the problems. But he left that opening that my mother could fill. And he was very happy to let the cultures blend.
Yes.
So we got to be whole people.
That's such a maturity to be able
Mhm.
to say, this isn't my world, but I'm not afraid of it. I don't object to living with it. I trust you enough to trust this space that's not mine and to let it be present for my family.
Mhm.
That's very mature. It's really beautiful.
Oh, my dad was amazing man, amazing man. And anthropology really helped too, because as anthropologists, we study every aspect of humans and we study cultures, and every culture has its own ways of introducing humans to spirit and encouraging that. So I think all of these threads really did weave tightly because I got permission all the way through.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd love to invite you to share a little bit about your methodology with round cards. Firstly, beginning maybe more generally with what value do you see tarot in particular
Yeah.
having for people, particularly in this way that we're discussing, this grounded everyday, this coming together of the mystical and the logistical in our life. Where do you see tarot fitting in there? And then maybe digging into a little about round cards specifically. What uniqueness do they hold that we should be paying attention to?
Okay. All right. So this is what I love to talk about. Please stop me if I go on and on and on. I love this stuff.
Maybe I'll stop you.
Okay. In my opinion, for the kind of reading I do, which is to do deep dives with people into their lives at moments they need clarity
Yes.
and help them figure out how to align and make conscious decisions that reshape their lives. In my opinion, the best outcome of any good tarot reading is a clear sense of how to reshape your life so that you don't just fall into the future of least resistance. And the future of least resistance is what I look for, what I see. I've heard tarot practitioners argue about whether tarot tells the future, and there's the camp that says no, it gives you reflective insight in yourself, and there's the camp that says yes, it does. I think this is the wrong question,
Mm.
and I approach it very differently because round cards, as you mentioned, give you vastly more data. What I can see with my round cards and the rectangular decks, of which I have like 60 that I love, is very different. All right. So I'll finish telling you about the future of least resistance. The future of least resistance is the future you yourself create through your habits, the patterns in your life you don't even notice anymore that are built on your deepest beliefs that you probably don't even have in your consciousness. With the round cards, I can see their traces all over your life.
Mm.
And I can make those explicit for my querents so that they can see them too. Let me give you a practical example.
Yeah, please.
All right. At the most basic level, and this is not my piece. This is a piece I built on, but the mother piece came. And one of the things that intrigued me is that the round cards themselves could have yang tilts or yin tilts, right? So if you've got a rectangular card, it has two expressions, upright or reversed. And each of those have a million possible meanings. And it's wonderful. Rectangular cards are a wonderful tool, and readers who use them can do great work, right? Round cards have can be tilted to the left or to the right, right? Like, okay, so let's start with this Two of Swords, right? All right. So when I tilt it this way, let's see, hold on. This way, you see the tilt to the right. Is that correct? That is a yang tilt. So everything from here to here is a yang tilt, which means that this card, which is about being a little bit stopped, paralyzed, having a boundary, waiting, maybe thinking you don't have enough data to move forward, and you may be right, that is clearly visible in your actions. It can be seen, it is public, and it may in fact be response to an outward demand, right? So that's yang. Yin, a tilt to the left, means that whatever's going on, its greatest impact is in your inner world, right? So when I see it here, anyway from here to here, I'm like, oh, okay. So what's going on here is whatever you're doing on the outside, and you're probably not talking about this if I see a yin tilt. Inside, you feel somewhat paralyzed. Inside, you feel like you need more data to make a decision. Inside, you are torn. Other people can't see it, but I can, right? Because it's right there. So that's just the first level of what I can see. And it is those things. For example, if you've got a whole bunch of yin tilts in that reading, the first thing I do is look for meta patterns. And if I see a preponderance of yin, I'm like, okay, everything's going on inside. Communication isn't happening outside. All the people around you, they don't necessarily know what's really going on. So we've got whatever problems exist. And then we have another whole layer of problem, which is that you're not talking because you don't feel safe and you might not be safe. So see what I'm getting right away?
Yes.
Able to work. Okay. So the future of least resistance, I can see all this detail, and we'll come back because there's at least one more set of things that I can see. But I'm able to trace this through the past, the recent and more larger past in my variation of the Celtic cross, the deep root of it, the greater background in the card at the top. And then the future of least resistance is what you are most likely to fall into because of those habits that are ingrained. If I see a lot of yins, I'm like, this person's gotten used to being introverted, not speaking. That pattern's going to carry out. Will it serve them? Let me look.
Yes.
And I can find places where they're setting up something, maybe something great, and it serves them. Maybe something not good doesn't serve them. And I can point it out and say, look at this moment here. Is this the future you want? Stop, reflect. Do you want to ask about it? Shall we explore? What other things could you choose? Right? And that's just with yin and yang, not even with expressions.
I love the when you said that it wasn't the right question to ask, can the tarot predict the future? You're showing us a little glimpse of the subtlety that can be on the other side of a question or in a different question. That, that predicting the future is it's a limited viewpoint, right? It's a linear question, right? Can we be here and know what's going to happen here? As opposed to, can we see the patterns that exist and make predictions about where they're going to lead and allow our intuition and our collaboration with the world to flesh out those possibilities in ways that can allow us to make choices now that influence the future. Not that the cards are like, this is what's going to happen in the future, but the cards are saying, look at this set of synchronicities, look at this pattern that exists, does that feel resonant to you? I'm sure people are like, yeah, that sure is
Very often.
what's going on for me. And then let's extrapolate, right? If we follow that pattern, where is that likely to lead? And what are we feeling in the connectedness of all things that shows us some of those possibilities? It's a much more nuanced question and answer. It's much less linear. It's non-linear, truly. And leans more heavily into the collaboration and the intuitive nature of this work rather than this oracle is, holds the key to knowledge. It's more like this is a reflection of the internal landscape that then we can externalize in a way that allows us to bring collaboration and consciousness to it.
You hit on something so important, Michaela, you really did. You said collaboration because this style of reading compels me to collaborate with my querent. I don't sit across from them. They sit next to me or up and above me, and we work together. We weave in. I'm like, I see this pattern, this pattern, this pattern, this pattern. And I don't let them tell me everything at first, so I'm not biased. Anthropologist, right? Like, so the first round, my deep dives are 3 stages. And the first stage, I don't want to know very much. But then after I've laid out the patterns, then we start talking. I'm like, so I saw this. So I saw this. You may be telling this, but I see this other thing you didn't tell me. And they're like, okay, right? So it's a collaborative process. You
Yes.
hit it right on the head.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I often, I mean, I encourage myself, remind myself and others to really view, whether we're working as a Reiki practitioner or a tarot reader or any other practitioner that is inviting a person into an intimate encounter with their interior. And we, claim to hold any expertise at all inside that experience to really to view it as a collaboration because they are the expert of their experience. They're the expert of their question. They're the
Bingo.
expert of their needs. They're the expert of what is the best outcome for them, whether or not they consciously know it, right? Often they're coming to us because they don't consciously know or they have confusion or uncertainty. But whether or not it's conscious, they are nevertheless the expert of where they need to go. And what we can do is create a container for that to be revealed and to help interpret it, but not to be the holder of meaning inside of that space. And it sounds like your process allows you to hold that, you know, space of facilitation without being the maker of meaning inside of that space. Does that feel true?
I love the way you said that. That is so insightful to create the container, but allowing them to be the ones that make meaning. That's beautifully said. And yes, that is what I'm striving for as a diviner. And clearly, that is what you're doing as a Reiki practitioner. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an interesting thing that happens for people. I'm curious if you run into this as well, because people do come to me sometimes, and as I've been more clear about, messaging how I work, this happens less and less, but certainly does still happen, and I'm certain it happens for you, that people do come to us to tell them what to do and to give them the answer and to diagnose the thing, tell me what's wrong with me and what to do about it, right? Like almost as if we're in a medical kind of situation. And they often do ask, okay, well, what did you notice? What did you see? What do you know about me now? And what should I do? And I do my best on the front end of a session and then reinforcing that throughout that the meaning that's here is yours to make, and I can share what I experience and what I notice, and then we can talk and we can work together on what that might mean for you. But sometimes, and back to the point I was making, inviting clients to view the session in that way most often comes as good news to them. They feel it as a point of empowerment. Often they'll sit up a little bit straighter and they'll say, wow, okay, like they step into a little bit of responsibility inside of the space, a little bit of, self-responsibility and empowerment inside of the space when I tell them, any healing that happens here is coming from you. I'm creating the container for it.
Mm.
And occasionally there'll be someone that feels disappointed, that feels like, oh, but that's why I'm here, is for you to tell me, to give me the information and the instruction. I wonder if that ever comes up for you and kind of how you hold that.
Okay. First, I want to say I think that's very responsible of you to reinforce in them that they will be the ones who do the work. They will be the ones who make the meaning. They will be the ones who do the healing. Um, I think our jobs as healers, and I do consider myself to be a healer, um, is to empower them, to give them as much clarity as we can about what we see, to help them understand how to take their power back
Yes.
and move themselves in the directions they want to go. So, one of the ways I handle this is I tell many of my people up front, look, first of all, I'm an anthropologist, all about the data, I spent decades listening to interviews and analyzing them and writing them down. And I know you don't learn everything from one listen. So I record, or I ask them to record, and then I ask them to go back and re listen. They can also read transcripts. They're AI transcripts, so they aren't great. I prefer they re listen 3 days after the reading, more or less, up between 3 days and a week, 3 weeks and 3 months, because they will hear things at every level they didn't hear before.
Yep.
And I ask them to take that responsibility to extract every bit of juice and meaning to give them clarity as they move out. When I do a reading with some, they will walk out with homework. They will walk out with between 90 minutes usually and 2 hours of tape recording, and they will have very clear designations. In the kind of tarot I do, spirit usually speaks pretty clearly and often calls people on what they're doing to co-create what's happening, right? And as I read the patterns, I read those messages. And then they have to figure out what they're going to do about it. I'm not right 100% of the time. Nobody is. But this is a pretty good method. And
Yeah.
fairly often, when people walk away going, yeah, I don't know, I'll get an email 3 days later with, I just talked to a dear friend and client of mine, and she was like, yeah, you know that thing that I said wasn't relevant at all? Well, it just really totally came up and now and I'm like, great, that's good.
Yep. Yep.
But always turning it around. You're the one doing the work. You're the one making the decisions. You're the one who will decide how this applies. I will tell you my patterns based on my experience that I see. You will be the decision maker. You will be the decider, right? Sometimes I'll encourage them. And again, I think this is being an anthropologist. The right questions are so important. The questions that empower you to act. So steering people a little bit away from yes or no, will this thing happen? And towards the how can I?
Right.
What is my first great step?
Yes.
Or what are some steps I could take? How can you ask questions that put the power back in your court? So I often deal with this in a sort of different way because my modality is different,
Right.
to encourage them to ask truly empowering questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Artful inquiry is such an important skill inside of this. I love to ask people, what should you be paying attention to right now?
Very good.
What part of you is paying attention to that? What part of you is ignoring it? Things like that.
Mhm.
Because asking good questions is another form of empowerment, of self-empowerment, and a
Yes.
self-responsibility, right? Because if we get so accustomed to, again, looking for answers from other people, not that we shouldn't, refer to each other and reference each other and learn from each other. We do that naturally. But are we able to ask the questions that steer our attention in the way that is serving where we're meant to go versus reflecting what we think we're supposed to be doing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And often the first questions that come, it's much better if they're followed with different, more nuanced, open-ended questions. How can I? Where can I look? What am I not seeing that I should be seeing? Um, what haven't I asked about? Or what haven't you told me that matters? Like all those questions that dig under the surface,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a piece here. I've been skirting around it a little bit, and maybe I'll name it a little more directly. We're living in times where things are getting dismantled, and inevitably new things are going to be built. And there's a
Yes.
lot of fear around that right now, and a lot of
Yes.
maneuvering and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of feeling of being swept up in the current of it all, of politics, of geopolitical things
Mhm.
happening that we have no control over violences and so on.
Mhm.
And it's a time that has happened many, many times in history, but we are in this time. Right? This is the one that we are inside of. I've been very inspired lately, well, for the last 20 something years, but it's circled back. An essay by Clarissa Pinkola Estes called "We Were Made for These Times." And
Yes.
it's really, calling on us to name and to confront the overwhelming feelings of being inside of what feels like a storm of politics and social unrest and all that demands of us. But to see ourselves as being worthy of those times and being made for them. And then to do what we need to do to care for ourselves so that we can actually be resilient and step into the way in which we were, in particular, made for these times. And I
Yeah.
feel that, I want to name that because, the types of work that we do, work that's in the realm of the mysterious, in the world of the unseen, in the world of the interior of the person,
Mhm.
sometimes can be viewed, even by people within that kind of work, as fairly insular, as being about, the individual and my individual path, and not necessarily about, the world, and almost as a way to turn away from what's happening in the world and to turn into this interior place. And I see it as quite the opposite. I see it as, we navigate this interior landscape so that we can better navigate our relationship with the world and how we're meant to show up in it, and to own the piece of it that's ours and let go of the pieces that aren't. I say that as a person who spent 20 years as an activist and utterly burned myself to the ground by taking on everything that was not mine to fix, and not really understanding what was actually mine, to fix, or not even to fix, to engage, whatever the right thing is.
Mhm.
So I'm feeling that in this conversation, and I don't know if that perspective resonates with you, but it feels so important to me to continue to name that when we do this work in the mysterious places inside of ourselves, it has everything to do with the world around us. It's a pathway into that world. And in that way, this type of work is about engagement with the world. It's not about turning away from it. And I just wonder if any of that resonates for you.
Pretty much every time you open your mouth, it resonates with me, which is why we got along so well during the first taping of the podcast. So you are again dead on. So I want to address this a couple of ways. First of all, of course, you're worried about this because you are a healer. Okay. And I'm going to speak from my perspective, and you and others, it's okay. You don't have to believe this. I know this is my belief. So I'm just going to put it all out there so you can just tiptoe around the shoals if it's not you. Since I was small, I believed I chose to be reborn at this time and I had work to do. I've known that since I was very little. And I have come to believe that many of the spirit workers and healers and teachers, both in the explicitly spiritual world and not, all chose to come in now. Because this time, I really do believe, is critical to the next stage of human evolution. And I think we came here on purpose. I think, in fact, oh, here I've got goosebumps. This is one of the ways spirit talks to me. So I've now got goosebumps all over my body, which says, oh, you're actually talking about something that matters. Okay. So thank you for giving me that opportunity. So I really believe that I am here to do two things. The first one is to work with individuals and groups to bring them clarity, because this method brings much clarity in helping individuals. And I also do political readings, which I don't talk about much, to situations,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But I'm also here to teach. And I'm so curious about how this is going to do. I would love to spend the rest of my life teaching this method to other people so that when I die, I leave a horde of people who can do that work of bringing clarity to others, who can use this tool in conjunction with their other modalities, who can fit it in different ways, who can make it better than I did, right? That's my job. I had a vision when I was working with Caroline Kenner at the Griffin's Grove School of Shamanism, which is now closed, but I learned so much, 3 years of work there. And there was one vision that hit me so hard. And I wrote everything down. I have all of it, right? Like I write everything. In this vision, I saw myself looking at the earth, and the cover of the earth was made of a kind of fabric, something that looked like a fabric. And as I zeroed in on it, I saw many, many, many small stitches, layers and layers of stitches that made up the whole globe. And in some places, each stitch was glowing, and whole areas of stitches were glowing. And in other areas, it was dark, and there was intermixture between dark and night. And in this particular vision, in this particular moment of practice, what I was told is that I was one of a whole bunch of people who would come in to touch each stitch of soul, to get them to light up, to bring their gift. And they would then touch others with light up. So then I saw the whole face of the earth lighting as we touched each other. Each soul unique, each soul able to give only in the best way what it had come to give.
Mm.
And I even got a name. I need to go back and look at my notes because I've forgotten it. It was like, this is who you are.
Yeah.
There are literally thousands and thousands of millions like you. You're not unique, but the gift you have is unique, and you will touch others and they will touch. And I now know this is like, I don't know, how long has it been since I graduated? A long time. 5, 6 years, something like that, 7 years. So I'm here to work particularly and mostly with agents of transformation, with spirit practitioners, with healers. When I was younger, all kinds of people came to me, and I did what readers classically do. I saw a million people with relationship questions and love questions, and as they grew. And now, pretty much, if you come to me, if you end up at my door, you have some kind of bigger destiny.
Mm.
And my job is to help you clue in on how to do it. And chances are very high you're going to go out there and you're going to light up your area of the grid. And that's the same thing I kind of did as a anthropologist, as a medical anthropologist. I ran a PhD program and I trained individuals from many backgrounds who came in already with knowledge. They were already mid-level practitioners. They had master's degrees. And I trained them to hone their research skills so that they could research and help to address racial and ethnic disparities in health and healthcare. So I did more as a trainer of those who would do other work than I could do by just tackling a research project on my own. And as a diviner, I'm in the same way. There are so many great teachers of intro tarot, so many wonderful teachers, and that is not me.
Yeah.
I work with people who already know some tarot, mid-level and above. And I'm here to give them that next piece they need so they can go out and light up the grid.
Yes.
So
It's the
that's what
special province of teachers, when I've kind of done work with my vocational path, and it's looked a lot of ways, I've done a lot of things in very different fields, but teaching was always the thread through it. And you're speaking to, really why that felt so true and why, as an activist, I felt like I was ineffective and couldn't actually get anything done because I was trying to do all of the things myself. As a teacher, it feels so easy because I just, like you say, I just have to light up that one stitch. The essay that I mentioned by Pincula Estes, it's a letter to activists written during the beginnings of the Iraq War, and she uses this metaphor throughout of the ship, of the great ship. And it begins, when a great ship is at anchor and it's moored in the harbor, it is safe to be sure, but that is not what great ships were built for. And it encourages us to go out into the open sea. And she paints this picture of, being this great ship at sea at night. And, you can only see the stars and you feel very, very alone. And you feel like the ocean is vast and it's too big to traverse yourself. But then you light the beacon on your ship, and the ship that's just right over there that you can't see lights their beacon. And then the one over there lights their beacon. And you signal to each other and you pass, that light along. And it's exactly what you're speaking to, right? That, part of what we're here to do is to remember that we're interconnected and that we live inside of a mythology of independence and isolation. And that's by design. And it's not natural and it's not who we are. And that we're meant to interconnect and we're meant to pass those beacons along so that we can carry the part that's ours and not take responsibility for the part that's not. And yet the whole tapestry gets lit.
oh, tapestry.
I have a dear colleague whose work is called Brilliance, and she works with a very similar concept and came also through a very powerful seeing of imagery around passing light from person to person. So I'm appreciating the repetition of that metaphor and that imagery. Yeah.
There are so many of us, and there's so much work we can do. And the paradox of we are one small piece of a huge group of individuals who are here to light the tapestry. And yet, the one thing we can do, only we can do it in that particular way, right? It's like a paradox.
Yes. It is, I often talk about it as being sovereign but not isolated. We are
Ooh,
sovereign. We are ourselves. We have our way within the Reiki precepts. The fourth of five Reiki precepts says, "Just for today, I'm true to my way and my being." And our way is that sovereignty, that those all the choices, all the experiences of my life. That's mine. That's particular. And I need to be true to that. I need to be true to those choices and to that path, and at the same time be true to my being, which is that interconnected nature. That I'm a stitch in a tapestry. I am I am one light in a vast sea of stars. I'm one point on a web of life, and it's all I can't exist without the rest of that light. And all of that can get very esoteric and it can feel very, metaphoric and like, okay, but what does that have to do with my life? What does that have to do with my choices? What does that have to do with, making any difference in this mess at all? And it sounds like, inside of your work, you're able to weave those things together, right? The
every freaking session. Yes.
the mysterious and the practical, the grounded magic of this world. And I love that. I love that so much. Yeah.
It's a joy. I love this life. I love what I was born to do. I love what I'm doing. Um, there's a song I've been listening to over and over as I do my weight training and my exercise, my cardio, and all the stuff that I'm doing. It's a Clean Bad Bandit. It's
Mhm.
called Rather Be. No place I'd rather be when I'm doing my work, either whether it's one person that I'm working with to help them get clarity or when I'm teaching. There is literally nothing I'd rather be doing. It is a joy. It is a calling. And my hope is that I will find enough people, not only who want to work with me to find that clarity and then go do their thing, which was a wonderful part of what I do, but I'm hoping that I will find people who want to learn the system. Like I only just told you one little bit. And the tilts that I told you, really, those were developed by Karen Vogel and Vicki Noble. It's the next level up that I've developed. And I
Mm.
want to teach it. I want to leave a million people who can do this method and get all this data and make it better than I made it and make this time a little better, the next 20, 30, 40 years, which I think are this critical time in human evolution.
It's a special sense of professional satisfaction to teach a teacher. I just recently graduated my first Reiki teaching apprentice. I've taught many people to practice Reiki as a practitioner, but this is the first person who explicitly wanted to teach it and wanted to learn how to teach as a separate skill set from practicing Reiki. And together we designed a pretty comprehensive apprenticeship program, and she student taught in my last 9-month program, and it was such a joy. And so she just completed that process, and now will be continuing to do some teaching with me. And yeah, it's a particular, like I said, professional satisfaction to know that you've you know launched someone into the same amount of capacity, if not more, that we have to spread this work. And I, yeah, I would love to learn your methodology. So, I
I'm
encourage
happy
you
to
to
teach it.
develop
I'm
that
going to
teaching,
be teaching in
teaching the
October.
teacher's
Absolutely.
practice. But,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I'd like to tell you one more piece of the system, but first I want to say congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
taught someone, you sent them out there, and that is a huge success. And if they're able to improve on what you did, you win the gold star. The gold star of teaching is when your students surpass you.
Totally agree.
So I wish for you the very best of the gifts.
Yeah, yeah,
Such a thrill. It's such a thrill to see your students thriving.
it really is.
So, so
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to say that. I'm
Thank
glad you get it. I feel
thank
like we're kindred souls in a lot of ways.
you.
Um, so the thing I wanted to tell you that has excited me so recently is I learned the mother piece, and it's a coaching deck, by a counseling deck. It
Yeah.
is gentle. It contains the solution to the problem. The card not only has like the Ten of Swords, which can be a terribly difficult card to receive. Um, the image on the mother piece puts the solution to the problem is right there. And I'm not going to get you into the weeds of the geekiness of tarot. We'll come back to that. But a few years ago, something happened that changed my world as a teacher, and I just went crazy over it. And that is that a round deck, there are a number of round decks, not too many, but there are a number I've been working with. But a few years ago, this was released. This is
Yeah.
the bomb because what this means is that anyone who is trained with Rider-Waite-Smith, which is the deck most people learn on, anyone who has that kind of knowledge, even a beginner's knowledge moving forward, anyone can learn the round system with the meanings they already know and run forward. And when I saw that, my mind was blown. I was so happy. I felt like, who do I write and thank for
Right.
this?
I'd love to, because I do like a good deep dive geeking out session. So I wonder if you would be willing to just show us an example from the deck and describe what became, because that is such a seminal deck that so many people are familiar with, and so many people are familiar with reading in the vertical, horizontal,
Sure.
rectangular format. So perhaps you could give us an example of, okay, here's how you would use this card in the original format. Here's what becomes
Oh, yeah.
possible in the circular format.
Oh my God, you're speaking my language. We're going to geek out here.
Yeah,
And I actually have my rectangular Rider-Waite-Smith that
perfect.
I'm looking at right now. And I just pulled a card. I asked, which card do you want me to explain? Which card do you want me? And it's a court card. And those are even a little more complex to read. So, and I'm the opposite of all, like the vast majorities of teachers in tarot that I have seen thrive on teaching beginners. And I love it. I think that's great. It's so wonderful. But I like to teach the mid-level and the complex stuff. So, okay, so let's do a quick comparison. We're gonna geek now,
Yeah,
okay?
do it.
All
All of
right.
them.
Here we have the Knight of Cups in rectangular form. All right. Every card has a million or is like a gem with many facets of possible meanings. But classically, right, classically, the Knight of Cups would refer to a man or someone with masculine energy, element water, so giant heart, great ability to connect, to display emotions, to express affection in upright form, someone who can be very loving and connecting and tender and caring. And one of the meanings it can sometimes carry is a lover or a new partner or someone who's going to be really good to you, right? And as long as the card is upright, then this is going to be someone who's pretty healthy with a positive expression, okay? And court cards can also have three meanings. They can mean some person close to you who's going to be important or someone who's going to be important. They can be a part of you if they show up in your reading, or they can describe a situation where those qualities are going to become important. You already know this, you're a reader, but just for people who might not be readers, I want
I
to make
don't, I
sure.
mean, I haven't trained in tarot specifically, so yeah, I'm definitely beginner level, so I appreciate that context. Thank you.
That's okay. So you've got this. And in the classic deck, if it's reversed, okay, what are we looking at? We're probably looking at if it's an individual, whether it's a part of you or you in this moment or somebody else, this is going to be somebody carrying pain, unhealed, unresolved pain. All of that tender lovingness is going to be pulled inward, is not going to be well expressed, may have turned to bitterness, may have turned to sorrow. This is not going to be a person who's going to be connect openly, even though their truest nature is to do that. And this is probably in this condition is not going to be someone you're going to want to partner with. If it's somebody close to you who has this tremendous capacity for love, but pain or sad or experience, then it's going to be hard to work with this person. And if it's a situation that is bringing out sorrow
Mm.
and tenderness and connection, right? Okay. So that's a lot. And you can read with rectangular cards and get a lot. Let's look at this through the next layer of lens in a circular card. Okay. All right. So you still have the upright and you still have the reversed, right? Okay. But you now have, okay, what I just taught you before. It's a little weird to do this. You have the turn to the right, which is yang. So this is going to make your night much more out forward,
Mm.
taking actions towards you, or you're going to take actions in the world that are going to be visible. Or the card could come up yin, which means whatever's felt, whatever's happening is inside. You won't see it. But now we get to the pieces that I learned over the last 40 or so years, right? Which is there were two possible expressions up and down for a rectangular card. Here, there are eight. I call them expressions. It can come up like this. It can come up somewhere here. It can come up halfway yang. It can come up here. It can come up here. It can come up somewhere in here. Halfway yin. here, and here. Every one of those expressions has its own particular nuanced meaning that layers over the card. So let's look at it this way. All right. I would have to look at the context of the meaning and maybe add clarification cards to figure out whether it's you, if this is your reading, or someone close to you or a situation, right? And I could do that by context and clarification if you, as the querent, directed me to. But right away, let's say that I see this card and I get it like this. All right. I'm going to say, wow, okay, let's read this first as if it's someone else or a part of you. The part of you that wants to connect in a loving and tender way is going to be really much more forward. You're going to lean into this. Or if somebody comes into your life, they're going to lean into it. They're going to reach out to you. They're going to speak to you. They're going to want to engage in you. This is going to be leaning into it and wanting it, seeking it, taking action. All right, suppose it comes out a lot more like this. The halfway points are sitting on the fence. There's a level of indecision. So they'd still be acting out and reaching out about half the time, but maybe half the time they'd be a little bit freaked out. So they'd be maybe acting in ways that are not as productive, not as great. Now we're getting into the part of the expression that is unproductive action, right? The upright is more productive action. Now they'd be flailing. This is like, oh my God, I'm so attracted and so torn and I have unhealed shit and I don't know what to do. I mean, like let me think of a possible example. So, that one TV show, it was an animated show. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there was a character who, whenever he liked a girl, he would throw up. Okay. So here we have, I got all these feelings. I got all this unhealed shit. I'm flailing here. It isn't productive. Whereas over here, that same person might ask you out or you might ask them out. And if it's reversed, again, we have a real block, a real problem. Well, what if it's yin? Okie doke. Once we get over here in this area, we're in the rumination quadrant. God damn it, quadrant.
Yeah.
This quadrant is when you are spinning in your head, or in this case, the night is spinning, spinning. Oh my God. I don't know what to do. Going over it again and again in their head, and it doesn't lead to productive action. And it's a product of anxiety, and it makes anxiety continue. And it's like going and going, and it feels like you're getting something done, but nothing comes of it. It's the gopher on the wheel inside. So your night, if you're the night, you're spinning. And if the night is in your world, he or she or they are spinning, right? All right, let's look at this tilt. What's going on here? Oh man, I want this and I'm scared. I want this and I'm scared. And I'm not saying shit about either of them. My mouth is closed. I say nothing. Here, right? Now we get back up into, so if this side, if the yang side here is action with productive on the, I'm sorry, it's weird to do this.
That's tracking fine.
Productive action on top and unproductive action, AKA flailing on the bottom. Here, this other part is reflection and thought. Unproductive reflection and thought, right? Here, we start to get to more productive reflection and thought, where they're like, okay, I think I want a thing. I think I want to connect. I think I want a relationship, but I have reservations. So I'm going to proceed cautiously and I'm going to hold back a little until I gather more data. All right. Okay. Now imagine my being able to look at every one of those cards I lay out on you and look at the yang tilt, the tilt, and look at the expression. I can tell you whether it's happening in or out of you. I can tell you what's going on. I can give you more detail. And do you see how habits and patterns emerge?
Yes.
Over a 14 card spread, the first thing I do is look how many yins, how many yangs. And typically there will be a tilt that keeps repeating itself, sometimes two, over the course of that larger reading. And I can see you have a problem. I bet you could probably guess which of these tilts in whatever card is super most common in people. It's the rumination tilt, right? The number one thing I need to work with students about is how to coach people through rumination because it's hard.
Yes.
So just imagine, look at this vast quantity of data. So if we look at the expressions in a rectangular card and there's 78 cards and we just multiply that by expressions, that's 156 expressions. There are a million interpretations. I'm not saying there's only 156, but 156 expressions. When you add in the 8 tilts, of the round card, we have 624,
Mm.
which sounds really scary. And okay, before I started working on the slides and working on the outline for the classes I'm teaching in October, I was like, oh man, it's really not that bad. You learn the nature of the expressions and it's okay. And I still kind of feel that way, but I've been working with an intermediate person who is my graphic artist who's helping me with this. And she's learning and she's like, oh, honey, no, this takes more help. So I'm working on how I can really take people's hands and help them with this.
Amazing.
But the data you can get.
Back to that scientific perspective.
Social science,
Data
anthropology.
mining. I love it so much. Thank you so much for that deep dive. I mean, you just did that so with such clarity. And even though I know that was, scratching the surface of what you do, I definitely can see the difference between the two methodologies and the depth and expansion that happens when you work with the circular format. And of course, it's wild, like what changing that one aspect of the card, its shape, not the imagery itself, not the meaning of the imagery, not the structure of the deck, but the shape of each individual card, what that can open up for us. And, of course, isn't that, part of the meta message we're looking at here is, right, when we change the shape of things, one element, different things become possible.
I agree. And I will say there is one huge benefit I see in moving to the circular route. For me, when you are a beginning reader, your primary challenge is to learn the cards, to memorize and to learn them and to understand upright and reverse what their expressions are. You need to learn the cards. But jumping to an intermediate level, in my opinion, as a teacher, is all about pattern identification and recognition and being able to create patterns between cards to find them in the larger spreads and what they mean and which ones are important and not. Because there's such a systematic way of doing it with the round cards, the pathway from beginner to intermediate, okay, I need to reverse whatever, from beginner to intermediate is, in my mind, clearer. Like I can take you there because first you're going to come in with a little bit of knowledge of the specific cards and we'll
Yes.
work with that a bit, right? Hopefully you've got a lot of the uprights nailed. Maybe you need to consult a little bit. Maybe you're beginning or working in the middle of the reversals. But at that point, I'm going to teach you the tilts, which are pretty easy to get.
Mhm.
And then we're going to start working on the expressions. And you will get even in that little moment, you could get the nature of the expressions, the feel, the character
Yeah.
of each expression, right? And some of them are dead easy, like rumination. Like who doesn't know what that is? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I can, while walking through each of you, it's like a stair step pathway to bring you into identifying patterns and working with them.
Yes.
It's like a clearer pathway to intermediate and advanced.
Yes. It feels almost like a language immersion program where you come in and you need to learn writing and reading and arithmetic and science and social studies, but you're going to do that through the lens of a language that's unfamiliar. And so it might feel a little bit, like a little overwhelming at first, but then you gain fluency in all of these things at the same time, and it accelerates at a certain point, is how I'm imagining it at least.
Talking to you at times is almost creepy because you will say things that I have been thinking in the last day or two using the language that I've been thinking. Because the last day I've been thinking, really, it's like a language. And out your mouth it comes. You
It is.
nailed it.
It is.
Yes.
I hold Reiki very similarly, because like in the the way that it's developed in the West, there's a linearity to it. It's, Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 and Reiki 3, and you learn specific things in each level, and it's linear, and most people hold the goal to get to the end, and it doesn't matter how fast you get through it. And that's not true for everybody, but there's definitely an emphasis on kind of moving through a linear pathway to an end goal. And, the way that it originally was taught and was held was much more organic. It was, we're going to meet each person where they are, what they need for their journey in that moment, and And then if they're ready for something to come through at that beginning stage, that is from the more esoteric traditions of the end stages, we're going to bring that through. If they've been working with it for several years and they're still really, working in the realm of mastery and that first entry point, then that's a beautiful and whole and complete practice, and that's where they should be. And so yeah, the fluidity of that, but still within a structure that holds, a container that holds the tradition and that holds honor and reverence and specificity of that tradition is really a powerful way to learn. And it's a challenging way to learn, but it's a challenging way to teach, but it's so fulfilling to teach that way, because we get to step in there with our students and be exactly where they are, and to let their life experience and what they have to put in the cauldron inform what happens in the space. And it's responsive, and it's dynamic and fluid and collaborative, back to that idea. So yeah, teaching in that way is delightful, and I can see how this structure, again, by changing the shape of the thing, allows for more fluidity and flexibility and collaboration, even in the learning of the thing to begin with.
You're the first person, and still to date, almost the only person I've heard to speak of Reiki. And it was so exciting to me that you did it as primarily an organic process that respects the individuality of the student, where the goal isn't just to get to the next signpost. And I love how you think of this. It seems so much truer to any time you are working with someone to give them the tools they need to walk, and to respect the way they walk it
Yeah.
and their own speed and their own path, and not to artificially push them or create them to meet some kind of outer signal post. I mean,
Yeah, and it's, my teacher often talks about the importance of being both firm and flexible. And it's like, respecting the individuality of the student and the particularity of the tradition. I never want to, again, teach Reiki as if it's something that, was born in the United States out of an amalgamation of lots of different traditions that got stirred up together. I want it to be understood as something that's specifically Japanese and that comes out of a particular time and place. And it is what it is because of those particularities. And at the
love
same
it.
time, part of what it is flexible. And part of what it is responsive to the many ways in which people learn and grow, and, leveraging the way that our body holds part of what we need, and part of our wisdom, and our mind holds part of it, and our breath and our voice holds part of it. And when we integrate those things together, we have a complete access to the wisdom that we have. And with my limited experience with tarot and with other forms of oracle, and my more extensive experience with the practice of soul collage as a way of building our own oracle, I see them in similar terms, that there's this powerful structure, right? The firmness of the structure is strong enough to hold incredible amounts of energy that get generated inside of it, and incredible amount of expansion and contraction and shifting and changing, and bringing things in from the outside and bringing it out from the inside, that there's enough structure there and tradition and people who have been with it and built it in a particular way, that that incredible flexibility can also exist. It's this paradox that's really powerful, and I hear that in what you're describing quite clearly.
Can I ask you to talk a little bit about the soul collage cards? They're
Sure.
so intriguing, and maybe show us a little bit, like do a little geeking on
Yeah,
your end too. I'm so
sure.
curious.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, soul collage is a practice. I learned it before Reiki. Actually, it's been with me longer, and I learned it originally as a way of helping to navigate some really difficult conversations in the university community that I taught inside of at the time. And it was a fascinating moment in the history of this women's college. It's historically women's college, around conversations of transgender inclusion in the campus. And we became the first campus to create policy around inclusion of trans people in a single-sex school. And it was a very, very, very long process, like a couple of decades in the making, honestly. But I was there probably a good decade before we, in conversation, before we got to the point of policy making. And the conversation was really difficult. And there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of identity stuff obviously coming through. And our chaplain, had the brilliant idea of hosting, conversation circles that were really, about the heart of the thing, not the policy of the thing, right? Yes, the policy decisions can be made, but we need to, our community needs to have a shared heart with the thing. And so I was taught a very brief version of this process to help people kind of get into their own heart and their own why, and what was about them inside of the conversation, as opposed to focusing the conversation on the other, and what they are doing and what their position is and all that. So it was so powerfully effective in facilitating that kind of conversation that I was immediately, exceedingly curious and, dive down the rabbit hole. And so what I, learned is that this is a practice for creating access to our subconscious through the power of found images with the engagement of our imagination and our intuition. And it comes through Jungian psychology. It was developed by a woman named Sina Frost, who is a Jungian psychologist, and developed it over many decades. And it's been in practice for 40 years or so. And many people have been trained in it. So this is the format that we're looking at. So they can be made, kind of any orientation. Sometimes people design them diagonally. But generally speaking, it's a 5x8 card, and you begin with found images. So finding images that speak to you for any particular reason, that jump out for any reason, pulling them out and beginning to craft them together in an image. And that card making process can be really powerful. Usually it doesn't come with very much meaning making. Usually you're just in the experience with images and your own intuitive process. Once the card is made, then there's a ritual for allowing this part of you, this part of your subconscious that has stood up and said, I have something to say in this moment, right now, today, in this moment, I have something to say. Allowing it to speak, allowing it to introduce itself, say who it is, what it's there to say, what it needs, what it has to give, what its gift in the totality of your life. Kind of holding the perspective that, we're, again, a single sovereign being. We have a way in this world, but we're made up of so many different parts, and those parts are made up of our experiences and beliefs and values and everything that we have walked through. And that most of that happens without our conscious awareness, that most of what's driving our thoughts and our behavior is happening, below the surface, but that we have access to it. And there's, and collage, if for those who know the work of Carl Jung, he worked extensively with collage and with found images generally as a really powerful pathway into the subconscious, because an image, first of all, it bypasses that, linear frontal lobe part of the brain that uses words primarily in language, and goes right to, that deeper place where image and metaphor and story and sound, is the language. And that part of ourself recognizes something in the image and grabs it, without us necessarily knowing why. And so then once you know who it is, then you've got a place to work with those parts, the parts that strengthen us, the parts that challenge us, the parts that terrify us, the parts that we really, really, really don't want anybody to see, the parts that we don't want to see, right? All of the parts, the little child parts, the part of ourself that is so excited about life and sometimes feels embarrassed by that, whatever the parts are, all the different parts of our identity as a parent or as an oracle reader or whatever it is. So yeah, that's soul collage, and I've been doing that as a practitioner for almost 15 years, and it's a very dear part of my personal practice, and something that I work with on a more limited basis, a more targeted basis. I'm in a little bit of a place of trying to figure out what the relationship is, because I think, like you, where I really want to work with people is people who really want to go on a deep dive, on a journey with it. I love doing workshops that are more introductory, but my joy is really when somebody's like, hey, I've got a decision to make. I'm walking through a period of life and I need to spend some time in these waters, and let's go. And we'll do vast readings, similar to a tarot spread, but following these constellations of these parts that have, pieces of the story and letting them interact with each other. And, we kind of do this big constellation on the floor and, I don't know, it's
Wow.
magical work. I love it.
If we ever get to meet in person, we're going to take out these decks and have a great time together with
I mean,
them.
we can do it on Zoom, it's not
That's
ideal,
actually true. We
but
can do that on
I
Zoom.
have done quite a bit. I mean, by necessity, quite a bit of it on Zoom. Remind me where
Okay.
in the world you are.
I am a digital nomad. So part of the time I'm in New Hope, Pennsylvania, part of the time I'm in Whippany, New Jersey, and part of the time I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And in every one of those places, I have a two-camera setup and I can
Yeah.
read over Zoom and I can meet over Zoom, all those things. So
I
you're
love
absolutely right. And I would love to do that with you
I
sometime.
love it so much. Well, that brings me to inviting you to share with our dear listeners, our dear watchers who've been along for this conversation, how they
Okay.
might work with you. It sounds like you can work
Oh,
with people remotely,
I do. Yes.
person in those three places. How might people find you if they want to step into this magic with you?
Okay. Um, So what I would say too is there are different ways to do it. If you'd like to work with me because you yourself are at a crux point and you want clarity and you want to make decisions and you are willing to do the homework that spirit gives you because it is a lot of work. You will come away with a big recording. There will be many pieces that come out for you to that'll be actionable pieces. I just want to make sure people know what they're getting into. The easiest way to get in touch with me, you could do it through my website, info at Sabrina Marie Chase, or actually, you know what? You could just contact me at sabrinamariechase@gmail.com.
No,
Let's just
it's
make
just
it
a
easy.
Gmail. That's so
Gmail. You
intimate.
could absolutely do that. And if you're somebody who wants to learn, who already is sort of in the middle of the beginner process or advanced beginner process, I will be teaching at least 3 different sessions, probably the third week of October 2024. And I'll probably sneak in an extra bonus section because I miss teaching so much. So that will also be available. I'm just working on it now. It's a few months before then. It's some months before that. But again, the thing to do would be to contact me at sabrinamariechase@gmail.com as I travel about. And I guess I'll start a waiting list for people who are interested in the class and people who are interested in working with me. And also, I've just discovered that a little while ago that Acuity, my scheduling service, allows me to make coupons, and I went nuts. I've made a bunch of coupons because it's really fun. So I actually made a coupon for you guys. I made a coupon for folks. It's a 20% off coupon. You can go to my website, you can schedule with me, and I sent you what the code is. If you could put it at the bottom,
Yep.
so people are always free to just schedule a session with me. And if there's not a session, if I don't have anything on my calendar, shoot me an email. So yeah.
Those links will, in fact, all be down below. We're recording this in July, but it'll probably go live somewhere mid-September, which will be much closer to your class. And so by then, we might even have the registration for the class down below
Awesome.
in the description. So check that out. And, clearly there's so much here for seekers of all types. And I love the way that you have, really integrated this work in the realm of the mysterious with our work in the realm of the absolute tangible nature of our day-to-day lives. I think that is so essential because if these practices are only available when we take time out from our life, then they're of limited usefulness to us. So thank you for making it relevant and juicy and mysterious all at the same time and beautiful, so beautiful.
This was an absolute joy. Thank you so much for letting me come and play.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
whatever comes of it, it will be good.
it will.
Thank you.
It will, absolutely. So, friends, thank you so much for being on this little journey with us. I know that there's been something in this conversation for you. I would love to hear what that something is, what questions you have, what experiences you have had with Tarot as a form of guidance in your life, what you wish that you knew more about. All of that, please do share with us in the conversation, in the chat down below. We would love to hear from you. And as you go from here into your day, into whatever this midsummer's day has to bring to you, late summer by the time it's published, may you be deeply provisioned for it. Thanks so much for being with us. Until next time, we love you. Goodbye.
Bye.